Welcome to Health Beat. I'm Judy Marie, and today we're going to be talking about vaping. My guest is Catherine Kiewning, and she is a Youth Engagement Coordinator at the Northwestern Health Unit. Welcome to Health Beat, Catherine.
Thank you for having me, Judy.
And you traveled all the way from Dryden to be here today, so this is great.
I did.
Yeah. When we talk about vaping, how does that differ from cigarette smoking?
Well, there is a huge difference between vaping and using commercial cigarettes. Vapes are electronic devices. They're powered by a rechargeable battery, and they're commonly containing a mixture that's a liquid, nicotine, other chemicals, and it's turned into an aerosol within the e-cigarette device. And it's inhaled into the user's lungs, similar to commercial cigarettes. They were initially invented to help smokers quit commercial tobacco cigarettes, but we're seeing a lot of non-smokers now trying e-cigarettes and becoming common and regular users of e-cigarettes. Yeah.
Okay. And you had mentioned they were originally designed to help people quit smoking. But what does the evidence say about that now? Because what do we know at this point in time?
Well, right now, e-cigarettes are not an approved cessation device. So that means that there's not enough evidence to say that they do actually help people quit smoking. So things like the nicotine patch or the nicotine gum are approved things that help people for sure quit smoking. It's best used in combination with therapy and like talk therapy and things like that, whereas e-cigarettes are more anecdotally known to sometimes help people, but it's not an approved device through Health Canada.
All right. Well, that's good information for our viewers. Now, you brought some things along here, and I understand we're going to do a demonstration
Absolutely.
on camera, and you've brought some products.
I have. So there are many different generations of e-cigarettes. So we have the first generation, which typically looks like a commercial cigarette. They're not very powerful. They're very disposable items, not super popular right now.
So this would be the first generation.
Those are your first generation, your cigalikes.
Okay.
They look like cigarettes. Your second generation are like the vape pens. So they're a lot bigger. These ones can be a lot more customizable. They're refillable and rechargeable, and usually a lot more powerful. So people typically use these if they're looking for a bigger cloud of smoke. This is your third generation. These ones are, again, really heavy duty. They're rechargeable and refillable, just like your vape pens. These are known as like the tanks or mods. Again, if people are looking for the big clouds, they're going to be looking for this kind of product. And these are way more expensive also. However, the most popular devices among young people, which is very concerning for us in public health, are pod devices. So there's two very popular kinds. One is the Juul device, and one is the Vape. Juul is probably the most popular right now, and it's a very, very sleek design. It's no bells or whistles. There's no button to use. The pods are very, very small and go right in and become the mouthpiece of the actual device, and you just kind of tap and wake it up, and you can go and use your device. So these are kind of your main generations of e-cigarettes. They're all created differently. There's no standardized way to make an e-cigarette, which makes it really, really difficult for us to know exactly how they're made and what's in them, which again is another big thing. We just don't know enough about the products to know whether or not they are safe.
Right. And I understand now, I had done a little bit of research that as of November 2019, there were 11 cases of people being, was it sick from vape in Canada or?
Correct. So as of January 7th, 2020, 15 people had been admitted to a hospital across Canada due to some sort of respiratory illness caused by vaping, as far as they know. There have been no deaths, as opposed to in the United States. There have been way more causes of illnesses from vaping. Not as many reported in Canada. So some of the symptoms, if you are using an electronic cigarette or a vape, shortness of breath, cough, wheezing, or any other respiratory gastrointestinal issues, you should probably go to the hospital and have that checked out by a professional.
So it sounds like if you are vaping and you are getting some symptoms that you never had before, don't delay, get it checked out.
Absolutely, absolutely. We just don't know enough about what's in the products that is also actually causing people to be ill. In the United States, they have said that it's been linked to vitamin E as a liquid. In Canada, they haven't released a lot of information about people and their sicknesses and things like that. So there's just a lot we don't know right now. So we're kind of erring on the side of caution and telling people, if you do not smoke, do not vape.
Right, and I think that's one of the key messages to get out to our viewers if they're thinking about it, for sure.
Absolutely.
Now, you brought some things along to do a demonstration.
Yes.
And we probably have maybe about 3 minutes before we go to break. So
Okay.
if we want to, do you want to do the demo now?
Sure thing.
Hey, you just tell me what I need to do.
Okay, so you need to roll up your sleeves.
Okay.
And so this is just plain cold, water.
Okay.
And I am going to just lightly mist. Okay, that's better.
Okay.
So stick out one of your hands, and I'm just going to go whoosh.
Okay.
So tell me how that feels to you.
It felt cool. It just felt wet. Very light.
Right?
Not sticky or anything.
No, it just feels like water.
It feels like water.
And eventually, it's going to like dry and evaporate on your hand, right? Teeny tiny water particles, and
Yep.
there'll be nothing left, right?
Okay, right.
Perfect. Excellent. Hold out your other hand. So this is just your basic hairspray. How does that feel?
Number one, it smells.
It's
Cold,
very smelly.
wet. Like I can see the water's already evaporating on my hand here. This one's much shinier.
Absolutely. So it's leaving some sort of like kind of clear film on your hands.
Right.
And yes, it's very smelly in here now. I'm so sorry. Yeah, so basically, I use this demonstration to show people the difference between what people originally thought was the vapor in e-cigarettes. So they were like, it's just a harmless water vapor. We're really like inhaling like flavorings and just water vapor and this like hot steam, and it's just, completely safe. There's nothing wrong with what we're breathing into our lungs. Whereas on the other hand, it's actually an aerosol. So it's just a chemical cocktail of whatever in teeny, teeny, tiny particles that are leaving this nice light film on the inside of your lungs. And they're leaving this nice film on the inside of your lungs that over time we suspect can and potentially will cause some sort of damage.
And the other thing I noticed is this is still kind of sticky.
Yeah.
Like it's still there. The residue is still there where this is gone.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
So, and for the most part too, if you were to show someone like from a distance, both of your hands, they'd be like,
Yeah.
we can't see anything.
You still see the difference there.
But yeah, that one is definitely shinier.
Yeah.
Because there is obviously something somewhat invisible on your hands. And
This
so it's
is-
the same thing with stuff settling in your lungs, right?
This has been a great teaching tool, and I'm glad that you brought it on the show. We're just going to stop for a short break.
Okay.
We're going to pause for a short break, and I hope you'll stay tuned for more of Health Beat. Welcome back to Health Beat. Today we're talking about vaping, and my guest is Catherine Kiewning, and she is the Youth Engagement Coordinator for the Northwestern Health Unit. Welcome back, Catherine.
Thank you.
So we had some fun on the first segment of the show.
Yes, we
a little
did.
demo.
Absolutely.
And I guess now one of my questions is, what are some of the concerns about vaping as far as where trends are going and who's using the vapes?
Absolutely. So My biggest concern working with young people is that a lot of young people who are non-smokers are starting to try and use e-cigarettes or vapes. And that's a pretty big problem because we are seeing that there's a growing trend that young people who have never smoked before and are trying and becoming daily users of e-cigarettes have the potential to use commercial cigarettes later on. And that's obviously just a big concern because we know that nicotine addiction is one of the strongest addictions that people can have. It's comparable to that of heroin, cocaine, and speed. And it's really, really hard to break a nicotine addiction, especially if you're starting really, really young and using products such as Juul, which always contains nicotine and contains really high levels of nicotine. And one of the things that makes Juul really unique is that they use nicotine salts over nicotine that's a freebase version. So in a lot of other e-cigarettes, they're using a liquid form of freebase nicotine, whereas Juul is using the liquid form of nicotine salts, which gives the user a more palatable and smoother experience when taking a pull on their Juul. So one, Juuls are really, really easy for people to use, and it's a lot smoother, very similar to that of the experience when using an actual cigarette. So it makes people it's a lot easier for them to become addicted to nicotine that way. So that is obviously a big concern. Nicotine also affects the developing brain of young people. So it affects the memory and concentration, and those are obviously very, very important for young people because they are typically in school, typically wanting to go pursue other schooling endeavors after, and those two components are really, really important to be successful. And it can also affect young people's brains and prime them for future substance misuse, which is a big issue as well. We obviously want people to live addiction-free lives, and so one of the ways that we do that is trying to prevent young people from trying or picking up smoking and now vaping. Yeah.
So I know, I remember back in the days with tobacco reduction and harm reduction there, a lot of the factors like, peer pressure and experimentation. And I think we've done a really good job with cigarette smoking. And I know a lot of the information was buried about the truth. It came out later. The research showed that it was harmful. So I'm almost seeing some parallels here between the two. Now, one of the things I was reading in preparation for the show was that some of those little cartridges can contain as much nicotine as a pack of cigarettes. Is that true?
Yes. So I only know specifically about Juul. It seems to be just a bit more than a pack of cigarettes, as much as in this tiny little cartridge here. Contains about 59 milligrams of nicotine. And a typical pack of cigarettes, each cigarette has between 1.5 to 2 milligrams of nicotine in them. In a pack of cigarettes, there's 20 to 25, so there's about 50 milligrams. So comparable, but Juul does have a bit more. So again, that is very, very concerning. And also, a lot of companies are being purchased by big tobacco companies. So even though e-cigarettes are marketed as this safer alternative to commercial combustible cigarettes, we are also seeing that their marketing is very, very similar to tobacco of olden times, right? Like there's so many similarities that we can see in their marketing, and they know for sure that they're not allowed to market to young people, but that's exactly what they're doing because young people are going to be their future customers. So it's very, very important for us to work on having the best kinds of restrictions on things like advertising and making sure that e-cigarettes and vapes are out of the hands of minors because it's illegal to supply a young person with a vape.
Right. And it sounds like at this stage where things are at, prevention is really critical, getting the information out there, giving people the facts as we know them, because a lot of the longitudinal studies and the research has to catch up with where we are now, and along with policies too, like, with the advertising or, preventing flavors and those kind of things, which I think we just heard something about on the news recently, if my memory serves me right. What about parents and guardians that are concerned about youth that they know that are either thinking about or are vaping? Do we have any messaging for them to help support them?
Absolutely. So my first bit of advice is to do your research, make sure that it's credible research. So if you're going to Google, make sure that you're going to a website that isn't funded by the tobacco industry, isn't, someone's blog that is a strong proponent for vaping. Get both sides of the story. There is actually a Netflix documentary series called Broken, and they do have an episode called Big Vape. So it does give a very two-sided experience on the issue of vaping and who's vaping and why is it a concern, and or why we should be embracing vaping. So it's very, very interesting. We also tell parents to talk early and often with their children about vaping and to be kind of the most credible source, and keeping those kind of conversations open all the time. Don't be judgmental about it. You can have your own opinions about vaping, but we're seeing that a lot of popular mainstream athletic, like very successful young people, are the ones who are most attracted to vaping.
Interesting.
It is very interesting. So it's a different demographic than the youth who are more attracted to smoking. Young people who are vaping typically have never smoked before and think it's disgusting and are just like, I would never do that. But with vaping, it's seen as this safer, cooler alternative to, rebelling in some sort of way.
And nicotine is nicotine, regardless of what form it comes in, and so the addiction component will be the same, whether it's from cigarettes or from the vape.
Exactly. And now we're seeing that there is a trend that young people who start vaping, who've never been smokers before, have the potential to become commercial tobacco smokers.
Right, which maybe they wouldn't have said, I'm going to smoke, or I won't smoke a whole pack of cigarettes in one session, right?
Exactly.
So the chance for having more nicotine in your system and the side effects from that are more prevalent with a device like that. So beware.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't smoke, don't vape. That's our key message for young people. And just remember that reduced harm implies harm, right? So just because it seems like it's something that's safer doesn't mean that it's safe. And we just want to make sure that young people have all of the information and that they're making the best decisions that they can with the correct information that they have.
And that's great information to end this segment on.
Great.
Stay tuned for more of Health Beat after this short break. Hi, welcome back to Health Beat. Today we're talking about vaping, and my guest is Catherine Kiewning, and she is the youth coordinator at the Northwestern Health Unit. Actually, youth engagement coordinator, right? So you work a lot with youth.
A lot with youth, yep.
We've covered a lot of topics already on Health Beat, and one of the things I'd like to explore a little bit more is we know there's nicotine in a lot of the products, which is highly addictive, but what are some of the other substances that are in the vaping products?
So really, really good question. So yes, there is nicotine in a lot of e-cigarettes. Juul always contains nicotine, we know that. However, because e-cigarettes are unregulated products, we don't exactly know how much nicotine is in a lot of different e-cigarettes or what other kinds of ingredients are actually in them, because companies can be dishonest about the labels that they're putting on their products. So I believe there was a study done on 9 different kinds of e-juices that said that they were free of nicotine. However, when actually tested, 7 of them actually had traces of
Wow.
nicotine in each of them. So there's no real rule saying, you have to have this kind of standard of each product to make sure that it's, safe to inhale and ingest. We know that one of the main ingredients in e-liquid is propylene glycol, and it's also one of the main ingredients in theater fog. So a lot of people will use it and blow these giant clouds, right, of what they call vapor, but it is obviously an aerosol, as we've demonstrated earlier.
I know my hand is still a little sticky, and I washed it during the break.
All right. Yeah, so there are a lot of different ingredients that we might just not know about. Some e-cigarettes were tested and found to have traces of heavy metals within them. And again, we just don't really know, which makes our job a lot harder in public health, because a lot of people ask us, like, what's in these things, and are they safe, and is it going to be okay over the long term? And really, we just don't know right now. There are no long-term studies saying what vaping is going to be doing to your lungs or the lungs of other people, because they've only been around for a few years. In 50 years, it might be completely different. So that is a huge challenge that we face in public health, that I face, talking with young people who are just like, well, we want to know what's in our products, and we look at the labels, and the labels say these things, but it actually might not be that. And that is, one of the hardest things, because, no one likes to be lied to,
Right.
especially young people. And unfortunately, we are dealing with an industry that has historically lied to the public about the addictiveness of nicotine, and how safe their products were. So, by that I'm talking about big tobacco, obviously, who have purchased a lot of very popular vape companies. So not a lot of independent vape companies exist anymore, because they have been purchased by bigger tobacco companies, basically to buy up their own competition and to keep making money. And that is a message we try and send to young people, that, they might be pulling the wool over your eyes. And, this is an industry that you initially didn't really trust, big tobacco, that is. And now, you think that vaping and supporting these companies is even better. It may not be, because you might just be supporting the same industry.
Right. So the same pattern all over again. So be informed.
Yep.
Ask your questions, do your research, seek out, and we will provide some links at the end of the show too for people who want some more information. Now, one of the questions come up, and one of the things that you mentioned is that sometimes people will either vape and then go to cigarette smoking, and we didn't touch on dual usage. So are there greater risks, or is that okay to do, or tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So what dual use means is typically a person who is addicted to cigarettes, they are wanting to maybe try vaping, but only in spaces where they're not allowed to smoke. So they're still continuing to use commercial cigarettes, and on top of that, using a vaping device to get their nicotine fix, say indoors or in a vehicle. A lot of indoor places that aren't private residences now are vape-free spaces. Before laws came into effect, people were vaping in like theaters and at their workplaces, things like that. That's not allowed anymore. But dual use does have its risks. I mean, a lot of vaping devices contain nicotine still. So if there was ever the intention for them to quit, it would probably be a lot harder, because they are getting nicotine probably even more throughout the day than when they were just using commercial cigarettes. So it can be really, really tricky and make it harder for people to quit in the future.
And I think we're just starting now to see some studies that have been done over a period of time that are saying, you know, the risks are increased if you do use both as compared to the risks of using just one or the other. So lots of
Exactly.
information to really think about and consider and be informed about.
Yeah.
If you had to give our viewers, I don't know, top 3, top 5 key messages that you really want them to take away from this show, what would you say to them?
I think the biggest one is if you do not smoke, do not vape. Bottom line. Vaping is not harmless. We know that. Even though there is reduced harm, there's still some implication of harm. We know that people are getting sick and things like that. So we just want to make sure that if you intend to stay as healthy as possible, maybe vaping isn't for you. There is growing evidence that young people who vape go on to smoke cigarettes. So again, if you don't smoke, don't vape. Nicotine also can harm the developing brain, and we want to make sure that we're giving our young people the best chances to be healthy. So, yeah, those are them.
Those are important key messages to
Thanks.
take away. Catherine, I want to thank you so much for joining us today on Health Beat, coming all the way from Dryden. You've shared a lot of information with us and with our viewers, so I really want to thank you for coming to Kenora.
Oh, thank you, Judy, for having me.
That's our episode of Health Beat, and we hope that this was informative, and please stay tuned for our next episode.